Hi, we're excited to invite you to be a part of something truly meaningful. Purpose-Inspired TV, a faith-based streaming channel and social media outlet focused on helping people discover and live out their God-given purpose. We're building more than just a media outlet. We're creating a like-minded community of content creators, coaches, teachers, business owners, faith leaders, and everyday people who are passionate about making a real impact, locally, nationally, and even globally. Our mission is simple but powerful. Help people in every area of life. Uplift and inspire through positive, purpose-driven, collaborate on real-world projects where there's need. Whether you create, teach, coach, or simply have a heart to serve, there's a place for you here. We believe that if you're human, you're worth helping, and together, we can reach and impact more lives than ever before. We can change lives and grow together. Our numbers are small, just like all the other platforms when they started. But as we grow, we will help you grow as a family. We will work together and pull each other up. If this sounds like something you're called to be a part of, we'd love to connect with you. We can participate on each other's shows. We can partner with each other on a cause. You can get a time slot on the channel. You can be a sponsor on the channel. Let's work together with and for a purpose. Don't just watch history, let's make it. Get inspired, Purpose-Inspired TV.
What's up, everybody? Pray everybody's doing well. Hope you're enjoying your summer break. I know y'all parents are like, man, you get to go on vacation, but you got those kids there eating. And y'all know sometimes they have these the theaters have free opportunities for you to take your kids to the movies for free during the summer. So take advantage of it. Take a look in your area, in your local area, to see if it's available. And if you don't have anything to do, take them kids to the movie. So we're going to be talking about films this evening. I got a special guest. We got two special guests. I don't see one at the moment, but I'm going to add Mr. Roderick. Good evening, sir. How in the world are you?
Good evening. I'm okay. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. All right. Good to have you. And I see him. He's back. Andrew.
Yes, sir. Sorry for coming to you from the garage, but there was kind of a chaotic situation happening, so I'm here in my garage, which is very Freudian, really.
Hey, that is fine. That's fine. So I'm in Jacksonville. Roderick, you over in Tampa?
I'm in Tampa.
Okay, I was just there yesterday. And Andrew, you said you're in DC.
That's correct.
All right, we got all different corners of the world going on here. So, well, good thing. It might be a good thing, bad thing. I didn't get to meet either of you before, so this is hot off the press. So, first of all, let's go ahead and introduce yourselves and let us know what we can be talking about.
Well, my name is Roderick Fulmer. I'm the producer of this film that we're highlighting today on the podcast. It's the Sigmund Freud Film Festival and Challenge. This is my 7th year of doing it. It's been quite an interesting journey, you know. Every year I always try to find a unique angle to do the film festival in order to get more filmmakers to submit films, and it's always an interesting grab at what people submit. Andrew's done them, I think, at least the past 5 or 6 times. I don't know if he did the first year, but we've done them subsequently. We'll see if we can do one this year. I don't know.
Hopefully.
Well, introduce himself.
Oh yeah, so I'm not exactly sure. Honestly, now memory fails how I came across the Sigmund Freud Film Festival originally and Challenge. But yes, I was. I've always been a big fan of the Alfred Hitchcock movie Spellbound, and it has a lot of Freudian concepts to it. And Salvador Dali did a lot of the art for the dream sequences in it. So a lot of the movies I grew up with, I was very sheltered as a kid. I grew up with a lot of 40s movies, and a lot of those movies had serious themes and deep undercurrents that were inspired by Freudian theories. So that's why I ultimately ended up submitting to the Sigmund Freud Film Festival and Challenge, and it also keeps me accountable for trying to create things. So I appreciate that, Roderick.
Okay, I know Alfred Hitchcock, But Roger, when I went to your page, I could not understand. I do short films. I've been doing film since 2008 or so. So I make films, but when I um, was trying to understand the Sigmund Freud uh, films, I didn't really get it. So for other people who don't really get it, could y'all kind of explain to me and others to find that type of genre that I haven't really never seen before?
Well, it's basically, anything that's deeply psychological. So,
Psychological.
which tends to be in a lot of films where people try to convey any type of message that that hits the brain. This year I have this whole thing of saying that it's movies that pick your brain. So the best
Okay.
example, in my opinion, is Psycho. I did another person's podcast, and he wanted to do Alfred Hitchcock too. So I said, well, what's the most Freudian of Hitchcock? I think it's like some people would say Spellbound Light. I think he said someone might say North by Northwest, Vertigo. Depends on everyone has their different favorites about Hitchcock. But to me, Psycho was probably just me personally. Very good. You know anything about the movie?
Yeah.
Quite reflection of the Oedipus complex. So, so basically, film that kind of like what is it about people saying right, and saying anything about a person? So there are plenty of movies that, and um, now some people who are Freudian purists would say that maybe something not Freudian might be something more Jungian, depending on your own point of view. So now every year I've emphasized a certain aspect of his books. Sigmund Freud wrote a lot of different books, as the father of psychoanalysis. So this year is Eros and Thanatos, which comes out of his book, one of his books. And years past, I've done his other book called Civilization of Discontent. And one year we did on the interpretation of dreams. So, dreams are a big part of films. So, that was really popular. I'll let Andrew answer too because, he really gets into the theory. So, like the past couple of years, he's always won that category, best adaptation according to theory. I think he actually looked up the theory. I think some people are a little loose about it. I think he actually researched.
Yeah, so for my part, the themes each season actually are what inspire the work rather than. I think a lot of people probably approach it that way, but for me, like trying to actually understand different aspects of Freud's written texts are always what suggest the ideas. So, like you said, Roderick, like it's kind of like more of a prompt where I'm not going to go out there necessarily all the time and read a bunch of psychological theory, just on the daily. But Freud's theories in particular play such a deep role in the films that I love. Films like The Shining, for example, or even something as relatively straightforward as Jaws, right? Like these things all have a Freudian context to them. So when you give the prompts, um, giving a certain work and trying to work within the core concepts of a certain Freudian work, and then also the kind of random prompts are things that I've done a little bit more randomly, but they don't usually have if I were to make my ideal Sigmund Freud Film Festival film, the prompts would all have specifically Freudian contexts to them, and I have never gotten to that point yet. But um, I work better with prompts. I work better with random kind of suggestion than I do as saying I'm going to set out to tell this specific story. So that's where I've always been drawn back to, and that's also where I've integrated friends to come in who want to work on these projects because they're like, this doesn't look like any other script I'm seeing. This doesn't look like a project that I get from my auditions or from friends who ask me to do things or things I want to write. I frequently encounter friends who are really good on the technical side of the house who don't like writing or don't feel talented writing. So writing for them and integrating them into the whole process is really cool.
Okay. Uh-oh. I think man, mute Andrew. Hello. Yeah, I guess when I it's an echo, so that's why I just mute Andrew and then I'll unmute you. Um, so yeah, so I got a question like Feud. I guess my one, I've seen a lot of books and different discussions about him, about the psychology and all those type of things. How did you get from his work to film? How did that go from all that discussion, all those books that he had, and who came to that conclusion? Let's make some films based on his work.
Are you asking me? Well, lots of times, people always ask me, why did I start doing this film festival? And my standard question is I answer that two ways. One, my stepmother, my late stepmother, was a psychiatrist. So, we had a lot of her books. Actually, she had quite a few books in my actual room. So I read quite a few of her books. And so, that's how I got exposed to Sigmund Freud. And then I personally have a master's degree in education. And Freud is mentioned a lot in education, a lot of education theory. And also, too, but the immediate reason why I started it, I don't know if any of you know, because I usually say it in the Q&A when we have an example. But I really started it off of the man Harvey Weinstein, who was, the film producer, well, I guess went to jail now for sexual harassment and rape. And, I really wanted to understand why someone in that position would do something like that, just, basically attack or be really sexually aggressive to very famous women, that really had to be something really deep rooted in. And he was a film producer. So I often wonder if, sometimes people who are filmmakers, they exercise their demons, if that's the right word I'm looking for, in their filmmaking. So I was trying to see some hint of that. He produced quite a few movies. He didn't always direct them or write the scripts, mostly because he made movies just to make money and get accolades rather than his own personal demons, like someone like Quentin Tarantino would. He makes movies more for his inner demons. But I guess the simple answer to your question is that I always like movies that are deeper movies. I've always been like that. I've never seen Friday. People often surprise me say Friday. I see very few comedies because for one thing, they don't like me laugh. I have to when I go to movies, I like to think. Other people tell me they like to go to movies to be entertained or laugh, but I like movies that make me think. If I go to a movie and work from the first 5 minutes, I feel like I know what's going to happen through the whole movie, and usually does. I feel like I've wasted my money. But anything where, in the first 5 minutes, I feel like, well, hold on now, this movie's going to be a lot deeper than I expected, than I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think I feel similar. Like I believe a lot of filmmakers, when they go to movies, they can, if they can figure it out, a lot of them they can figure out, can pick up on a pattern and they can figure it out before. Because I do that a lot. Like I already know what's going to happen, and most of the time that's exactly what happens. So I understand what you mean about seeing what's going, not being a challenge. So speaking of challenges, so when I do these film competitions that I participate in, they give us like a prop, a line of dialogue, a genre. But I guess that's the genre. You give different things to be in the film. So what's your process of getting getting them to write and film this type of movies? And I guess Andrew, because he did it so many times, you can tell us what his process is.
Oh, okay, yeah. You can ask Andrew. He's done.
Yeah. So again, like I'm actually drawing a blank on what the first Freud film was at this point, because like it's I know that probably sounds like the process isn't special to me, but I do. So I dance, right? Also as a side hustle, and I do the Nutcracker every year. So just full disclosure, if you've never seen the Nutcracker, like every version is different, and every individual creator, every artistic director who's creating the Nutcracker, right, which is the holiday ballet thing, is like, I've got to do this thing. Like, how am I going to make it? That's not how I feel at all about the Sigmund Freud Film Festival. Like every single time it's been a whole different process. And I know you're probably kind of asking more from the side of like the film festival side of like how do you determine what the props are, what the prompts are, which I'm going to ask Roderick to answer on next. But I remember specifically one prompt was to show a brain in any capacity, and my wife had started molding soaps to sell on Etsy, and it was a whole thing. It was kind of a fiasco, but long story short, she had molded soaps that were in the form of brains. So I was like, well, I've got this as a prompt for the film festival, so that little brain soap's going straight in my frame. And that was like part of my key frame for another part of the storytelling. So um, finding a way to integrate ways of things that are in your life, elements that are in your life, is really fascinating and really engaging to me. And from the perspective of being a Freud film festival, again, going back to that theme of like, if I could find a way to necessarily make all of that work symbolically would be the ideal for me. But it hasn't happened yet because I don't really have a budget and it's kind of thrown together on my end. Um, but there's always meaning behind the script and the intention.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. It sounds similar to the way we do the regular film festival. So other people shouldn't be afraid to even to try to participate in this.
Absolutely. But it is it's also a festival too. So I also get quite a few entries of people who submitted previous work that's not part of the challenge, and some of those are very good. I get quite a few of them from Iran. For some reason. And and a lot of people who use Film Freeway. I don't know if you bring Film Freeway, Joe, for accepting your entry. But there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, I live in Turkey or Iran or India. I can't afford the fees. Can you can I join your film festival?" And I said, "Well, you have to see if your film, fits within our theme." And some of these Iranians, they make very, very edgy movies. I mean, they really are edgy. Um, one of them even 2 years ago, he even got in a little trouble in Iran. He was a little too edgy. Um, so and so we get a lot of people who submit things that are different. I remember once we first 2 years I received this one woman who made this movie about a woman who was aroused by fire. Every time there was fire, she would get aroused. I said, "Well, hold it now. I have to make sure." After that year, I had to put like a little disclaimer that we had any parental discretion is advised. So I added that to the rules there.
Sorry, I keep on hitting mute and unmute. So how do you, I guess, as filmmakers, how do you incorporate the dreams, like different dream sequences? I know a lot of times in film, like we try the future and the past and the dreams. We have a hard time doing that. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I think as somebody who submitted in the past to the festival, I'll kind of address that. Like last year, our entry last year, one of the prompts was to have an extraterrestrial character. Like an extraterrestrial had to be somewhere in the film, and I thought, like, how would that work for the script? And I ended up coming up with the idea that a woman had a really persuasive dream, like she had this crazy dream where she thought she was levitating and she thought that an extraterrestrial was telling her um, that the world was going to come to an end because we aren't taking care of the environment. And so that would be an example of kind of like integrating one of those things of like, how does the theme fit the source? Like once you get the prompt, you come up with the idea. It's almost like if you've done a 24 or 48-hour film festival where you get the prompts where you end up integrating those ideas into like what the core of the idea or the core of the theme of the piece is.
I was originally a in 2015 a producer of a Tampa producer of a 4-hour film challenge, and so that's where I got that idea from. To do a challenge where you have to incorporate elements. Um, the funny thing is that Andrew, I've tried to think of other film festivals that might uh, be similar. Like some people suggested doing an action film challenge. We had a fella locally who did an action film challenge, which was very popular. So popular that he had to stop doing it because he it started. He would get lots and lots of injuries. It ended up taking over his life. I thought about doing a spy one. A lot of people told me they would like a spy challenge. And then I'm also a big fan of jazz music, so I thought about doing a jazz music film. A lot of people told me they wouldn't go see that. That's why I like jazz. They wouldn't go see a movie based on jazz. I don't know. I guess people do like action after at the end.
It's an interesting idea. Like, so being as a genre itself, like a jazz film festival, right? Obviously, a lot of international cinema uses jazz. There are whole films that are based around jazz, but also the role that jazz plays in a lot of different genres. The one of the pet peeves that I've had for a long time is where you have a detective character and the detective character always has a saxophone riff that happens, right? So it's just like there I was in my office. I pulled out the bottle of hooch and you get the saxophone riff. Kind of breaking away from well, maybe celebrating some of the cliches about jazz in film genres, but would be nice. But a jazz film festival, I think you'd end up with a lot of hard-boiled detective kind of narratives, or maybe something totally different. Maybe that's what would break us out of that cliche.
Well, the whole purpose of me doing it because I did a jazz radio show.
Mm.
Uh, I still do one, but something the lightning struck the antenna tower, so we had to reformat it to be online. It's a little more difficult to do online because all the music is copyrighted. But my whole purpose of doing it was to show how diverse jazz is. When people think of jazz, they usually think of smooth jazz, which is basically Kenny G, and some people don't like consider Kenny G jazz. Or they think of jazz music from the 50s, where it's more like in a nightclub, just a quintet of just a bassist and a drummer and a saxophone player.
Right.
And they think of that as jazz. Those two things are jazz. Whereas jazz is very much a very broad uh, genre of music, and it can really, really anything. But anyway, I guess we can get back to filmmaking. But there is an interesting YouTube channel about jazz in filmmaking. Um, I always like, that one of Clint Eastwood's biggest films was his movie about midnight, about jazz.
Also, wasn't didn't Play Misty for Me involve jazz as well because he was a jazz DJ? Yeah. Yeah.
One, I
You
did a competition about 2 years ago, and I actually did. I tried to see if I could do it all by myself, and I did, and I was thankful I got my mom in it. But most of it, I played two characters, and I was a detective, and it was a film noir. So you look at those black and white, and like you said, probably have the jazz music playing in the background, the black lighting. So, what are some things that you need to use in these films, or is it a look? That's what I'm asking. Is it a particular look that you try to get so when you watch those movies, this is a Freud movie?
Roderick, what would you say as the curator? What would you say is there something you're looking for?
Well, it would definitely be something that's deep. If you're going to have a Freud movie, it's going to be something that's very deep. And it'll be very obvious when you put it in the very first 5 minutes. So so I'm trying to think of some of the injuries that I've seen. I know one year, I don't think this was your film, really, but I remember this other person did a really good film on the Oedipus complex, So if there's anything that would be very stereotypical, is that it would be someone that's in a therapist's office and they're with their psychologist. Now that happens quite a bit in some Freudian movies. So
Mm.
in this particular case, the little boy was seeing a child psychologist, and he was always acting out, and they couldn't figure out why he was acting out. Um, and of course, it's about the Oedipus complex. I don't know if we can say this on a religious theme podcast, but the whole thing about Freud is that he's jealous that his of his father's competition for his mother's affection, and that's classic Freudian theory, and that's what it was. So, but I often tell people that and a lot of the times when I've gone to the Institute of Psychoanalytic Institute to promote the film, is that they often say that the whole thing about the Freudian complex, that it's always about people discovering trauma in their life. It's not about discovering hidden secrets or hidden desires. It's about any type of trauma that someone's had in childhood. And once you've identified that person's trauma, they can overcome it. Because Freud, at the end of the day, was not a psychologist; he was a neurologist. So he was all about discovering biological roots of mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, he had from what I understand, had a lot of theories. Do people take some of his theories or change his theories or work with his theories when they make the film?
In terms of filmmaking, yeah, like I think specifically, again, going kind of just to bring up a specific example, the movie Spellbound, which is from the mid '40s, is a movie where a new doctor shows up at a clinic, and he seems kind of strange and out of it, and so everyone starts wondering what's going on with this guy, and it turns out that he has trauma. And there are some massive spoilers don't want to get into, but he's actually also not who he's representing himself to be. So in that film from the mid '40s, like that's an adaptation of the theory to make a suspense thriller. And then like kind of generally the Freudian theories have been used in a wide variety of ways by filmmakers to yeah, specifically the Oedipal complex, specifically other ideas as kind of a springboard of like, oh well, this is where I want to take my screenplay. Like, oh, maybe these characters. An example would be Mel Gibson's version of Hamlet. In the version of Hamlet that Mel Gibson does, Hamlet specifically has some unexplored or like undeveloped feelings for his mom that is a way of interpreting Hamlet. So like Freud's theories also kind of go back to like, old school drama and theater as well.
Okay. So I guess using his theories, what is something that you like to lean on when you making your film? Is it something that particular area that you like to work in?
Yeah, the theme this year is for Eros and Thanatos. Basically, going with the Thanatos aspect of that because, like, so we've got like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has Thanos, right? Who's like
Mhm.
the death force, like the Greek kind of like death god. And part of the theory there is that in people there's a destructive force that drives them towards doing things that aren't constructive to them, that don't uh, promote their life, right? That aren't healthy for their life. And so one of Freud's concepts was kind of delving into that and saying like, why do we have these destructive tendencies when somebody feels something is why can't somebody perceive that something's destructive to themselves? And going back to again to what Roderick had said, that's the trauma talking. The trauma makes you kind of swerve towards destructive things rather than constructive things. And so that's the theory that I'd like to explore.
But there's a whole host of theories that people can explore. If they're making films, and not even realize they're Freudian films. A big one is narcissism. A big aspect of a lot of Freudian theory. For projectism, defense mechanisms, Freudian slip. Obsession. Um, uh, Quite a few. I think one year we had the uncanny, and that's something that's in a lot of movies. And, I went to go see that movie, The Substance with Demi Moore. I said, "Wow, where did this come from? This is definitely an uncanny movie." I think someone has seen this should be submitted to my film festival. That really came out of left. What happened in that movie came out of left field. So, I think a lot of filmmakers, well, I should say screenwriters. Well, filmmakers, screenwriters. I think they can learn a lot from Freud's theory because he often said that that they represent unconscious desires. Now, I don't know if you've come across this, Andrew, but I have read. I haven't pinpointed, but I've read it somewhere that Freud actually was not a big fan of films, but I think they were in the early stages when he was alive. I think he died in the 30s, so it's not like film
Yeah.
were as sophisticated as they are now. I think if you were alive today, you probably would like
It's funny that you say that because I feel like we have so much good scripted cinema now that like very lengthy and like well produced, like heavily produced things that kind of hide some of those themes. So I think a lot of the cinema that I think is the most Freudian is actually that original cinema. Like one of the first things that people reacted to in movie theaters was footage of a train pulling into the train station, right? And there's a very immediate normal human reaction of just being like, oh, like it was almost like 4D to them back then of like, oh, something's moving towards me. Like that physical reaction that people had to something as simple as a train pulling into a station. Now we view a little differently from the Freudian context of that, or the kind of broader philosophical context of how of how we perceive things, how the physical mechanism of making us view things that we're not seeing in the current moment, and audiences being there's audiences literal psychic space being invaded by a large cylindrical object. I feel like it's very Freudian. I know that's like kind of the basic Freud. That's like the very straightforward Freud, but
You, in a way, you answered the question, but we're in 2025,
mm,
and you said this is way back in the 30s and before. What do you say to people who think that his ideas may not be still relevant, in today's time?
Well, the thing I would say to that is that people thought that during Freud's lifetime, his theories were not popular even during his lifetime. There's actually an interesting movie about Freud's early life where he's talking about his theories and people are just laughing at him, making fun of him. That they were ideas that were based on they weren't scientific. That tends to be a very common criticism um, from the psycho from people who are usually behavioral psychologists because they tend to be very scientific. They're not fans of Freud. But my response to that has always been, and I even said this to someone else, actually, a clinical psychologist that he agrees with me, and it's that Freud was not a researcher, because of anti-Jewish sentiment at the time. He was not allowed to be a professor at a university. So a lot of his theories come from him, from how he handled different patients, and their reaction to how he treated. And then some people would say that the reason why a lot of his theories weren't scientific is because he had a very small sample. He just treated his patients, and many of his patients were very wealthy people there in Vienna. But the thing that I often like about Freud, and a lot of people agree with me who are not fans of Freud, is that they were very powerful theories. Now, I'll take for example one theory that a lot of people think is ludicrous, but I think is very very powerful. So he had these stages of psychosexual development, and that from you're a baby to the time that you're an adult, you go through different phases of development. Now, there's one phase where he talks about, that people learn to be potty trained. Um, Now, he says that, if you get stuck in any of those phases, then, you'll develop a neurosis later in life if you don't come to grips with the fact that you were stuck in that phase. So I was thinking, I was even telling a friend the other day, what would your life be like? What would your mental state would be like if you never learned potty training? You know, every human being has lived on this earth has learned potty training. So if you did not learn how to potty train, and you went through life like that, you might be a very grumpy person. That's how they say that people who are have OCD or overly meticulous, they're anal retentive. So if you were able to control if you were really proud of yourself for the fact that you can potty train yourself on your own without anyone helping you, then you might go through your whole life thinking that you're very disciplined, very structured, very OCD. Now, needless to say, there's nothing scientific about that theory, but I think it's a very powerful concept, and that would be something you could really show in the
Okay.
That's usually the
And
reaction I get with people when I tell them. He said the thing I like about Freud is that he said things that most humans had never heard. The whole idea that that the id, ego, and the super ego. People say, "What was he coming? Where did he come up with this stuff?" Or the uncanny, or that civilization would be better off if it was already attached to guilt. These things are in the 1930s were very forward thinking. I think nowadays people think those things now, but back then they were probably very outrageous.
so I guess it's a two-part question. Do you how do you say this? Do you try to spark discussions from these films, or have there been any discussions or debate over a particular film that everybody, when they watched it, they just carried on a conversation and couldn't stop talking about it?
You mean a film that's been at the film festival, or?
Well, yeah, yeah. Is this one at the film festival, or well, basically, are you looking for films to spark different discussions, or was it one that in particular that you remember that did spark discussions, and people continue to talk about it after the film festival?
Well, I don't know if you saw this one, Andrew, but there was this one made by this fella in Iran where the person was disabled and he was constantly trying to get people to come to help him,
Hmm.
and it has a really surprise ending. That one generated a lot of discussion.
I bet I was very moved by it. Not to kind of like do the performance involved, but the actor, I believe himself was actually disabled, so he like couldn't communicate verbally, and he was very much like, "Ugh, ugh." I know that's I'm not trying to mimic what was happening, uh, but what was going on with this person, like that's such a powerful scenario, and it works best in a short film, probably, honestly. That's where the short film format can be so powerful, is you're presented with a circumstance that doesn't suit a grander narrative but is a real human experience.
Okay, so I guess because, like I said, so many years ago. But what would you think he would say about the different films at the film festival? Do you think the films that are being made are capturing his ideas?
Sigmund Freud would,
Yes.
that was hard to say. He was a grumpy man. Like for instance, I had a person that the only reason I say that is because I try to get people who are actual psychiatrists and psychoanalysts to be part of the film festival, and they always say, "Well, I don't know." It seems like the people who are more interested are filmmakers. Like I try to market it to people who are psychologists, and I think it's because they tend to over analyze, see too much of nuance in situations. There's a professor in University of Florida that's an international expert on Freud. He's the professor of England, and he's currently the president of the American Psychoanalytic Institute. And I can just never get him to be part of my film. And then some people who have been background in psychoanalysis, of coming to the film festival. Well, not all those films have anything to do with actual Freud theory. Some they'll say some of them. So I guess to answer your question today, Freud might be a little overly critical. Like you say, well, that's not really my theory. I really so
I think an interesting, a really interesting thing to bring up is the humor one. So Freud wrote about what comedy is essentially, what jokes are, and that's something not a lot of people think about. But a lot of people make Freud jokes. When you think about jokes, like one of the most straightforward Freud jokes is a Freudian slip is when you say one thing but you mean your mother, which is like that classic construct about the Oedipal complex. So a lot of people know the jokes. If you've ever seen Bugs Bunny say, "Oh, and so how did that make you feel?" Like everyone knows kind of the tropes of what a psychologist should be like. At least old school psychologists should have gray hair and Coke bottle glasses and have somebody sitting on a chaise chair, all those kind of things. But Freud himself actually talked about something psychologically that I don't think I'm not familiar with contemporary literature on psychology, but a lot of people haven't talked about what's the psychology of jokes. What's the real psychology of why do we laugh? Why do we laugh should be this is cutting kind of like the core of what Freud's value is. Why didn't we talk about how we laugh or why we laugh back in the Old Testament era? You know what I mean? Like people have made jokes since then, and we haven't really had a whole lot of literature about why do we laugh? What's a joke?
And Robert. Um, well, I saw Andrew. Did you have to leave? I know we started late.
Oh yeah, I actually probably should go here pretty soon.
Okay, I didn't, I didn't interrupt. So we got like let's stop at 45 minutes. So 2 minutes left. So let's talk about the film festival and the remaining. Well, I guess I can still keep going with Roderick if Roger want to keep going. But let's talk about the film festival this year.
okay. Well, we're still taking entries, so people should go to Film Freeway and look at Sigmund Freud Film Festival and Challenge, and they'll see different elements that are part of this year. I've got some good ones. As Andrew said, the overarching theme is Harold Damage. I also have, a little element for kind of nine and color. The funny thing is, I know song by Chris Brown telling me the meaning of the rhythm. Uh, some of the meaning of the number. So that's part of this year's film. And then so we're taking entries until July 26th. Sometimes, I have a little leeway if the person, still making it, running late. And then we're having a screening August 9th. Sometimes that's a change too, because sometimes, you might get like one good offer where it happens. So, but yes, but the deadline is August 26th.
Okay. Well, Andrew, you can let us know a little bit what else that you're doing and your filmmaking, and you said you mentioned dance. You can give out any kind of information about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. If anyone does want to find me, easiest way is on Instagram as Andrew as it gets, just like it sounds. Yeah, I'm in the DC area. I've got a film coming out soon in which I'm an actor, action film. I'm the thing I do every year is the Sigmund Freud Film Festival. So as a filmmaker, like excited to submit again, and yeah, so glad to be part of this conversation about Freud.
All right. We thank you for joining us. So I'll let you go.
All right, cheers.
Oh, all
Thank
right.
you.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining.
All right. Okay. So we did we talked about it a little bit. So what's like some of the I guess the base I know we can probably find it on this on Film Freeway. Well, what's the process? You register and you just start walk us through it.
Well, what most people do is that they once they go onto Film Freeway and see what it's about, it's a challenge and it's a festival. The challenge part is that in order for the films to be competitive, they have to be original. So they have to have certain elements, and those elements this year are, in addition to the overall theme. See, it should say the film should dramatize Freud's concept of eros and thanatos, and I think a lot of people heard third thanatos because of the Marvel movie.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the other elements, in order to make it an original movie, that they have to use the color crimson red, and then they have to have a line of dialogue, and that is, "Give me the clues to solve this riddle." I got that from that Chris Brown song, that down. And then have a single stack or single card from a playing card. Deck of cards is very Freudian. If you see a deck of cards in any movie, they're trying to send a message. Just like any movie where you see any type of rain, it's about the rain or people go out in the rain. You know, that's general agreement that something bad's about to happen. Impending doom. Rain signifies impending doom. Um,
Okay.
and then a character named after a month, a year, or a season. So it could be like June or season. The person's name could be Autumn. And I thought that because I had a personal trainer named Autumn. So I said it has to be a month of the year or a season.
Okay.
Uh, and then that's basically it. And then the film can be up to 20 minutes. Most people don't make it a whole 20 minutes because it's kind of hard to make a 20-minute movie, um, unless you have, unless you're really organized. Most of them are usually about 7 or 8 or 10 minutes. And then we're gonna have the screening on Saturday at noon, August 9th, at the Net Park Theater here in Tampa. And
Okay.
lots of times, and for the filmmakers who allow it, I have a website, and I'll show the films on the website. Some filmmakers don't want me to do that because a lot of them are trying to find distribution deals for their films.
Hmm.
Like here, I had someone that made an outstanding movie. It was a movie they had already made. It was for the festival. It was very Freudian, and it was about this woman who kept hearing voices in her head as she went to a psychiatrist. And I said, "Well, can I show this movie online?" He goes, "Well, no, because they're trying to get a distribution deal for it." But and like I said, I already have two films already from these two guys from Iran, and I watched them already. And once again, they make very edgy movies. And then I've got two other people who participate every year, including Andrew, and I've got two others coming. So I like to have at least good 10 films because if they're about 20 minutes, then you've got a good film festival, and then you can have good competition.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So
And
we've been. Go ahead.
well, I just wanted to mention too because sometimes we think of some people think of a film festival. Because I have another friend, Barry Gaines. He does a film festival. He does the more traditional film festival where it's for over 3 days, a couple of days, and then they have like workshops. They have
Right.
people come in and tell you how to get involved in the industry. And then I try to keep mine 2 or 3 hours. I don't try to make it something bigger because this is really a labor of love. When you have those big film festivals, that's when people usually have a nonprofit made, and they're really making that a career. They're getting out sponsors, they're getting donors, and they try to get industry insiders. Um, I might try to do that one day, but I don't know. That seems like a lot of work. I'm more about the ideas of the films rather than the process of making money with them. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to making money, but that's not my intention.
Right. So that's been one of my ideas, but wanting to do a uh, like the TV channels, purpose inspired TV. So I wanted purpose inspired film festivals. But like I said, it's a lot of work, a lot of work. And speaking of the channel, so we should be talking about somehow to get some films that are allowed to put it on a channel. We can have like a film festival on the channel. And we probably could use some film from the past or something. We could just No, we can hammer it out and figure it out. But I like the way of helping get some, people's exposure, more exposure. Because a couple of years ago, it was this. Well, every year it's a 48-hour film project worldwide. So I don't know if the process. Some of them are um, throughout the world. They have these particular ones in different cities around the world. But then they have this one that's worldwide at the same exact time. So everybody, whenever strike midnight at whenever overseas, that's when it starts for them, and then when it hits here, throughout wherever the sign goes, that's where your start is. But anyway, a lot of those films are shipped, they're sent in, and they're not really seen anywhere other than the judges. So one year I decided to do a kind of like quote unquote mini film festival. I had people to send them here, and we met downtown and we played them there. So because I knew that we did all this. That was my thing. I was like, I worked and we did all this work and made this film. We sent it in. Who gets to see it? It's like nobody got to see it. So so that's why I'm thinking like with the channel, let's make some other opportunities for people that the film might be seen at the film festival and a few people here and there, but then who else get to see it? So that's my idea of using the channel to be able to use it as a platform to let people's film be seen in a wide area.
Yeah, like these people who submit these entries from Iran. I don't think most people would ever see a movie from Iran.
Right.
Yeah. I
So
didn't even make such edgy movies in Iran. You keep hearing you hear so many things about Iran, but they have a very big film scene there. But it's within the context of their country.
yeah, I think a lot of things that like we take for granted. We have a lot of freedom to do stuff, and we just whatever. But when you don't have the ability to do stuff, you figure out a way.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, so I would love to see different films from around the world. I really like, hey, if you haven't left the country and know what's going on in the rest of the country, you're missing out on life. You really need to see more than what they've just presented to you. And I like these films. You're getting it from real people. You're not getting it from the industry. You're not getting it from the professionals. You're getting it from the people, the real people. And you get another side of different stories from getting from them like that.
Yeah. I often say you get a film from a Hollywood studio, you're getting a formulaic movie.
Mm-hmm.
Some years ago, when I was the president of the Student Film Club at USF, I invited the chair of the film department of University of Central Florida. He was my lunch speaker, and I had all these students who were at this luncheon, and he kind of like crushed their dreams a little bit because he says, now if you plan on having a career as a filmmaker in Hollywood, I want to tell you, you think it's some great artistic vision. He said it's anything but. He said that every minute of every movie that comes out of Hollywood has been tested and approved by probably three levels of people. It's not and it's intended to make money. And they'll rewrite a script just to make more money. Because I just wanted to mention real quickly here, my background is in instructional technology. I have a master's degree in instructional technology. And one of the things I thought about doing with that degree, still might do it, who knows, especially if I go on a PhD level, is film testing. Film testing. And I got that idea because I was watching the DVD of Final Destination, the movie about the people who get on the airplane and they
They
yes.
got a new one out now.
Well, yeah, they have a new one out now. Well, they on the DVD they have an alternative version, and in the alternative version it has a much more positive ending. It's a more positive ending from the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And in the documentary of the film, they said that the studio did a film test at that ending, and they said it bombed. They said that the viewers wanted to see something horror. They wanted to see more killing. They didn't want to see the positive ending. So the studio told the director, gave them a $2 million budget to reshoot the ending based on how they tested the film. So that's what a Hollywood studio is. You think it's this great art they're trying to make. Some of it can be art. They have art house movies, but at the end of the day, it's really a commodity that comes out of a Hollywood studio.
Yeah. And actually, I was just at a conference. I was in Orlando for that. And I went to a conference, and there's, I guess want to say his name, but he's a TV producer. There's a lot of TV shows that come on the air, still on the air now, that he produced over the years. He just recently walked away because, similar to what you're saying, yeah, he's got the job, but really don't have that much say. It's cookie cutter, just the way it's supposed to be, as long as you do what we say. So you can come up with an idea, but then they can take the idea and do what they want to do with the idea, and not what the person who created it, or he's the producer, we're expecting you to do this, but we really want you to do what we tell you to do. Yeah. So with these independent film, your own film, you get to do and tell the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, true.
And let everything fall the way they fall.
It's definitely an industry. People forget that. I mean, it's an art. Movies is an art, but it's also an industry.
Yeah. So, so our time is about wrapping up. So, any final words?
Well, like I said, I encourage people, if they want to get involved in the film festival, to go on to Film Freeway and look at Sigmund Freud Film Festival and Challenge, and we check out some of the other information about we have about the year before. Don't have any of the entries online, because like I said, some of the filmmakers, are looking for distribution deal. But you can see some of the other things that we've done in the past, and we have a website, and I encourage people to create an entry. It can be short as 1 minute, or it can be as long as 20 minutes. And they can submit something also too, something that's done before. If they did something that they feel fits the theme of psychology, Freud, or anything that sometimes people send me things that are just strange. Because they think, well, Freud's strange. Let me see this film, it's strange. And so it's really good. So I encourage people to be part of the film festival. And
okay.
We'll do it next year.
And you did mention Alfred Hitchcock. There's some other filmmakers that could, even modern film makers that you can describe, that you can say to give them some idea of what type of film, what it should look like, and what it should feel like.
Well, David Fincher.
Okay.
A lot of people David Fincher. Quentin Tarantino.
Okay.
See, who else is good one? Christopher Nolan. He did what's that movie called? Memento? Inception.
Okay, I know Inception. Yeah.
That was a popular film. So they would know those directors.
Okay.
The African American filmmakers, Spike Lee, he's done some really good stuff. That's kind of Freudian. What's the other man? Gary Gray. He's done some good ones. It would have to be somebody that has a little bit more ability to be independent.
Okay.
There was what's his name? Steve McQueen. That's out of England. He's a British fella. He does some edgy stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our time for now. You just stay right there. Okay, everybody. I appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time, Joe out.